Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our very first panel. And as today is, oh, here comes Morgan's beautiful quote that is on her shirt. So today we are focusing on survivorship. And so it makes perfect sense that we start with a survivor panel. We have three amazing panelists from around the world. We have Canada represented, we have Scotland represented, and we have Australia represented. And so I'm just going to give a very, very brief overview of my survivorship story, and then we'll kick it off and turn it over to our panelists. So I was diagnosed at 17 months with bilateral retinoblastoma. I received radiation, and as many of my fellow adult survivors also received radiotherapy or radiation, and my left eye was removed at 23 months. I continued to have active tumor growth for an additional 5 years. And then for 5 more years after that, received exams under anesthesia, EUAs, to monitor. And thankfully, there was no more growth. So at age 12, after approximately 50 surgeries, I was declared cancer-free. And as many of you know who have had radiation, there are lots of perils. My mother says it's the gift that keeps on giving. So eyelid issues in my eye with the prosthetic eye, and facial indentations and deformities as I grew. So by the time I was an adult, you know, I definitely looked different. I'm very thankful that in high school, I developed a wonderful, wonderful set of friends, along with a bestie from kindergarten who's on our board, Kristen, who's watching, and a very, very dear friend, Kelly, who I met in 2nd grade, who've been lifelong friends, together with my wonderful high school friends and an amazing, amazing group of friends that I have made as an adult. Nobody cares. They don't care that I might have looked different. They don't care that I can only see out of one eye. And that, you know, as Cheryl spoke to, coping, finding a group of supporters and friends is just key, because it doesn't matter to them. 3 years ago, over the course of the last about 12 years, I've undergone a lot of reconstructive surgeries, including an eye socket reconstruction, which we'll talk about in the All About Prosthetic Eye session, and doing facial reconstructive surgery with adipose stem cells, which means they take stem cells out of the fat in your stomach, which means liposuction, a little added bonus, and they fill in kind of where the indentations are, and the stem cells help to heal the radiated tissue and muscles, but also fill in those indentations and depressions. And about 3 years ago, unfortunately, something happened during a surgery, and I had an optic nerve stroke, which is also known as ischemic optic neuropathy, leaving the 20/25 vision that I had in my right eye, leaving me legally blind. So over the course of the last 3 years, I, no pun intended, but in the blink of an eye, went from a completely normal life to being completely legally blind. My vision is 20/800, which 20/200 is legal blindness. So not being able to drive, not being able to cross the street by myself, not being able to send a text message, just my entire world turned upside down. And so it's been a very long road over the last 3 years, but slowly but surely, you know, I'm the only one that can make the decision to put one foot in front of the other, and it's been a long road, but as I mentioned, those support systems and those wonderful friends and my amazing family, and I have lots of extended family members and loads of cousins. You know, you take it day by day, and I've gone back to work. I've gone back to my charity work. I'm producing an international pediatric oncology conference. So, you know, you just have to take the good with the bad. Doesn't mean I don't have bad days, but it's just a pleasure to be here, and has made me even more committed to not only retinoblastoma advocacy, but to survivorship, because it's an absolute passion of mine, as I know it is with my dear friend Abby White, who's the COO of We See Hope, who I know is on here. So hi, Abby. And now I'm going to introduce our awesome panelists. I'm going to introduce them each as they come on. So our first panelist is my friend Genevieve, who I got to know last year through the One World conference in Ottawa, as she and I were both on the planning committee. And Genevieve is a unilateral survivor. She lives in the Toronto area, and she is the president of the Canadian Retinoblastoma Society. So I'm going to turn it over to Genevieve.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Really, really appreciate that kind introduction, Marissa, as well as the opportunity to present today at this incredible event. Yes, we were on the committee together last year, and I'm so excited to be back again. Always gives me a bounce in my step, a zest in my day going forward after this event. So I'm very much looking forward to being here. With retinoblastoma has began in 1984. And when I was around 6 months old, my parents started noticing holiday glow in my photos, as well as a white film at specific angles when I was in the bathtub. My mom would bring up some of these issues at doctor's appointments and opportunities to see specialists. And she was often told that it was normal for baby's eyes to wander and that your baby would be fine. We will check again when she's over 1. My mom very much felt that there was something else going on, and she pursued, as most parents do. We asked for another opinion, and she waited for months to be able to get me in to see another doctor. Thankfully, they immediately recognized the tumors and sent us to Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto to meet Dr. Chu. I am a unilateral survivor, as Marissa mentioned. I had my left eye enucleated at approximately 8 months old with no other treatments required. It was already a grade 5 tumor, and there was no time for other interventions. During the following months and years, my extended family members, my brother, as well as myself, underwent regular EUAs, spinal taps, CT scans, as we've mentioned, and other survivors have discussed, these examinations were ongoing. We did not have the molecular mutation at that time. And as a non-heritable carrier, I am not at a higher risk for secondary cancers, such as my peers with the heritable form. Living with that knowledge and insight, I still limited my exposure to carcinogenic products, sun exposure, x-rays, and other things. And when making the choices to have my own children, as Cheryl had discussed in her keynote, I had very similar thoughts around that I knew that my children would have a low chance to develop this disease. However, if they did, I also knew that they could have a full life without limits due to early detection and monitoring, and that I had overcome, and so other people could too. Having differences does not have to be a challenge or straining. We all have something that we live with. And my 2 children were born healthy and are non-carriers of RB. So one of the things I wanted to discuss today is the other side, I guess, of the coin, because we often discuss some of the triumphs and the thrives. But today I'm going to tell you about some of the challenges that I've had. So how have I been impacted by my diagnosis? I would say there are many ways. And these are some of the ones that have been, I guess, more challenging or have taken some time to process and understand about myself and find means to overcome. So some of the psychological, parental and family support. From my experience meeting survivors and hearing other people's stories, it is very clear to me that we grow up feeling about ourselves and our bodies in the way that it is presented to us by our family members, especially our parents. So for example, I've met survivors who have been denied their emotions and experiences by others. They've been told to move on. You survived and you're fine, move on. I know people who were told to be secretive of their prosthetic or being a cancer survivor. No, we don't tell people that. We did that. It's fine. You're done. And then, of course, there's those of us who have been raised to be extremely powerful and strong and not accept anything less of ourselves. And so is perfection necessarily the other side? Medical trauma, of course, it was, I guess, alluded to or discussed some of the things that can leave a lasting impression through Morgan's discussion. Many of those things I have been impacted by in terms of negative touch, ongoing experiences of powerlessness, and being limited memories during childhood because of, or in turn from, many negative memories and treatments. Various times in life, grief has risen around insecurities, loss in my life, and vulnerabilities. We've had an exposure to repetitive medical procedures without control over our own bodies. And so sometimes those things can form your view and trust of the world around you. There's been a social impact in terms of making friends. At times I've been liked or disliked because of the eye. Friends have told me latter that they thought it was cool, so that's why they wanted to be my friend. I've been subject to bullying, crude comments, and they often stick deep. But participation in getting involved has always been an outlet for me. I was always put into various opportunities to allow to build community, village approach for opportunities for successes as well as failures. At times I would be unsure if a look or a pursuit from someone of the opposite sex was a stare or an unsure glance. I would often put myself into a friend position in order to protect and be accepted. Rarely would I ever be the one to pursue in the fear of rejection and insecurity. The physical impact, of course, binocular vision, having a prosthetic, wearing glasses. I wore for periods throughout my life. And then there's been periods in my life where I didn't want to identify and be as obvious and wear that flag. And so I've not worn glasses for periods of time in my life as well. And I do, again, because I like them and I know that it's necessary. I've often identified or reported identifying as more of a individual with a prosthetic than I do as a cancer survivor, as I don't really remember a lot of those parts of my life. But having a prosthetic and having repetitive exposure to the eye being clamped open or negative touch around the face is definitely more how I identify and see myself. And then, of course, behavioral feelings of rejection, deep fears, creating healthy routines for myself to offer compassion and care. Pursuit of cognitive behavioral therapy as an adult has made me form new thinking patterns and help me to build coping strategies when I perceive big things and anxieties around loss of control. Having insight in these areas has allowed me to understand supports that are available for me and how to practice self-care. When finding community and support within the RB world, there has always been challenges around what we fit into and what category and what's available. So in the 80s, my mom was the one to initiate a retinoblastoma family association due to that gap. During those years that we would get calls to come down to Sick Kids Hospital and meet other RB families, connect and share stories were the most memorable experiences in my life. As a youth, I would attend events, picnics, concerts, dinners, and connect with other survivors and their families. I would speak publicly and gain confidence through explaining my story and understanding the value of supporting others. I identified less with the RB community as a teen and a young adult and into my early 20s as well. I wanted to find my own fresh identity and didn't feel the need to have those types of connections prevalent in my life. However, those experiences did and still continue to shape me and fill my cup. Those opportunities to meet and answer questions for families are the most impactful childhood experiences and allowed me to form a very strong identity of who I was. I would meet other children and parents and share stories at picnics, concerts, fundraisers, and these relationships were formed. We often felt, or I often felt, a strength in numbers, the feeling of acceptance and understanding, that connection and draw to others who have empathy for you and where you can feel helpful and needed. I've been approached in various opportunities to collaborate on RB content or media, and I've always felt honored to be able to share. So we try, as I say, our CRBS tries to foster a community on various platforms via phone calls, text, email, in person when we can, video chat, group events, social media. And often when I connect with other adult survivors or parents of teen survivors, they will report that they've never connected or spoke with another retinoblastoma survivor before. For me, that's a very hard thing because I know how much I gain from those relationships and those connections. And so I almost have a feeling of empathy toward that lack of connection for that individual, because there's something I can't put my finger on, but it's very important for me to be close to others who have similar experiences. So I had an opportunity to contribute to this book, Resilience, Stories of Cancer Survivorship, created by I Hope Canada. One of their co-founders is a retinoblastoma survivor, Vanessa, and she is an active member of our society. So I will know that this script is a little bit small and maybe difficult for some of us to read, but I wanted to be able to provide it so that you would have it. I will quickly read it because I think it's excellent and it gives a very good insight into one person's experience. So I was interviewed, they discussed my experiences, and then two artists, young artists, created these pieces, one being the illustration and two being the poem. So the Genevieve story. Born to the zest of summer, life holding plans much bigger, a girl who is in no way a quitter. An apple keeps the doctor away, they say. Obscure those words seem to be a misplay. Parents heartbroken as though it is May Day. I'm so sorry, my little girl, for half your sight has been taken. Cancer oh so callous. Reborn is a girl with a glass pearl, left one eye to see the world. As the hands of time tick-tock, the trauma of battle fades, yet her scar of her victory ever remains. The glass eye never quite fitting right with the young girl close to checkout. The pearl chooses to mimic the oranges. The employees left aghast retrieving the pearl. A hike in the silver snow, the pearl again evacuates, the darkness of the light swallowing it. A search party for the lost eye, found underneath the cold dye. The pearl acting up, an adopted teenager wishing to rebel, echoing, treat me as your own. Learning of the wish, fulfilled is the desire. The ticks and talks signifying the passing of time. For a moment, the girl is in school. Kids too honest, as though misrule. Sticks and stones may break her bones, but words remain in memory. Now a young woman, volleyball spiking her with inspiration, a form of liberation, given a sense of aspiration. Playing beach volleyball, the pearl not an eyeball, a fact almost forgotten as she loses herself in the game. A young woman all grown up, a wife and mother of two, with pearls having come and gone over the years, a collection she has, a mentor to the children of the pearl. This is the story, the Genevieve story. So this can lead into my next most significant, I guess, piece around being a survivor. For me, it's very impactful to meet and support the other RB warriors that are out there. I appreciate investing time listening and connecting with those children about our special eyes. I see this twinge come over them when they realize that I'm like them and we connect on another level. I offer to engage with them in questions and exchange stories. Often we laugh and say silly stuff or share what people have said to hurt us. Engage in child life programs designed to benefit their needs. Obviously, we've heard a little bit about some of the recommendations from Morgan around what those might be. It is my mission within CRBS to offer connection and community through Survivor Fellowship, The charity does many things, but it is my drive to connect with other survivors and empower them to feel their best through acceptance and understanding. In this picture, I show Connor, who I met at the Crab Symposium in 2020 in Toronto. He had never met another person who had similar experiences to him. We connected instantly and really formed a bond. He seemed to have the same kind of draw to fellow survivors as I do. Not something I can explain, but I can feel it. And I had to let him know that he's not alone. One other example for me of a passion and a connection with a survivor comes through an experience in the last few years. I was introduced to Ricky by a mutual friend at a volleyball event who said, I think he had the same disease as you, but I'm not sure. I mean, he has a left eye prosthetic, but I don't know how or why. So after a tournament, I showed up to chat and meet him. And we stayed for over an hour after the gym was all cleaned up. The janitor was sweeping up, and we're sitting on the bench still exchanging stories, strategies, tips and tricks, ways to cope in the game, our history and family and experiences. We joined a co-ed 2's beach volleyball league together, and we finished third overall. We had to make a lot of adjustments and accommodations for each other as we're both blind on the left side. Other teams were constantly in awe of us as we only had 2 eyes between us. However, we seemed to always be in sync. It is, again, a relationship that fills me that I can't always put my finger on, but I know that he is a lifelong friend, regardless of changes or trials in our own lives. Parents and families face a wide variety of challenges, emotional and financial. These sacrifices provide an overwhelming sense of gratitude within a child who is a cancer survivor. However, we also learn to care for ourselves, and it is an ongoing and unique experience because of our rare genetics and the varying situations and developments for new treatments or approaches, and that no 2 cases are alike, making RB care over time very different. Various times in life, such as post-surgical challenges, hormonal changes, pregnancies, major life experiences. I've had both sides of the coin where some professionals will overplay the cancer history and some professionals will understate the concerns. So it has been my experience to become my own patient advocate and to help my professional teams to create a partnership and to treat me as a holistic view and not only from a one channel in terms of their area of expertise. I have found that it is most beneficial to be questioning and to be proactive in my approach of my healthcare and my well-being, rather than being passive in terms of what's happening to me in my care. For various reasons, I wanted to close out my discussion around considerations in survivorship. These are my 3 points that I really think sums up for me what a survivorship focus can look like. So do your own homework, be informed on your genetic profile, long-term effects and outcomes, necessary interventions, and are they necessary? What is out there for us? Did you ask the questions? Are there survivorship care plans? And is this an opportunity where maybe you could sort out a specialist, or is this something average that you can deal with your GP? Be involved. Often long-term survivors can feel alienated, and there are gaps within our RB community. Teens, young adults, our dads, some of our male survivors. And cancer does not have to define us. However, it was a defining moment for many of us and will always be a part of us. This community will also always be available to us. And lastly, share. Own your story, embrace your experiences, own your truth. Never know what connection might come from sharing or who you may have an impact on.
Thank you so much, Genevieve. That was a wonderful, wonderful story. And I feel like I know you even better now, and I really appreciate you sharing with everyone. Our next survivor is quite late in Edinburgh, Scotland. His name is Kieran Donovan. Some of you might know his mom, or I think we have more international people who say mom, Angie Campbell, who is also a retinoblastoma survivor. And it's been wonderful to watch Kieran grow from a teenager into a college student, and who will be graduating from the University of Edinburgh with a degree in pharmacology this year. And it's my pleasure to welcome Kieran.
So before I get properly started, I want to pick up on what Genevieve said at the end there about sharing and owning your story, because that's something that I know I had difficulty with for quite a while, where I felt, I couldn't share my story. People wouldn't want to hear it. People would see me differently, maybe even judge me for it or something like that. But over the past few years, I'll pick up on some of the things that helped out with me finding acceptance. I found that the response has been really supportive from everyone, and I'd say definitely do own your story and don't be afraid to reach out to people about it. So with that said, who am I? So I'm a bilateral retinoblastoma survivor. I inherited a mutant copy of the RB1 gene from my mum, who is also a survivor. As Marissa said, I'm from Edinburgh in Scotland, where it is currently just after midnight, so it's really late here tonight, and I am in my final year at university. I'm studying pharmacology and hoping to go on and do a master's after that, and maybe even a PhD further down the line. We'll just have to see where the road goes. So diagnosis, I was diagnosed very early on at 5 weeks old. They knew to do genetic testing for me because of my mum's medical history. So that was done when I was about 2 weeks old, 2.5 weeks old. And the result came back that I had inherited the RB1 gene. And then few weeks later, in fact, the anniversary was just last week, I was diagnosed with the bilateral retinoblastoma. So chemotherapy started, again, the anniversary is coming up in 4 days, pretty quickly after that. And that went on until around Christmas time in 2000. And then I relapsed in that January before going on for more chemo, which was then followed by yet another relapse. And that was then followed by intense radiotherapy, cryotherapy, basically throwing everything we had at it, which eventually did work because I entered remission in February of 2002, and I've not had any issues with cancer since then. So for my childhood and teenage years, I knew there was something different about me growing up. I knew that there was something that set me aside from everyone else. Like I would be having to go down to London for eye exams 3-4 times a year until I was about 4 or 5. Then it became every 6 months. Then it became once a year. And that went on until 2008 when I started being seen in Edinburgh. And I was, as I say here, I was diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress, in 2013, following a referral for therapy from my school's educational psychologist. And that explained a lot of the previous problems I'd had, particularly around treatment, around the severe anxiety that would bring up. So that was a big challenge for many, many years, and it only properly resolved itself last year when I felt in control of it all. I think that's always going to be the key, is if you can help your kid feel more in control of their treatment, then definitely find ways to do that, because it can make a big difference. But now I want to go into the main focus of my talk, which is finding your community, finding, as I believe Marissa put it in last year's conference, finding your tribe, finding your family. And that has been the big thing that's got me to where I am today. So I'll be coming on to this. It's got a full slide for it. But I say first met here, that's not exactly accurate. It's the first time where I gained a proper appreciation for meeting other survivors was at Camp Sunshine in Maine in 2011. And we've been back there 4 other times after that. But we've also, before that, I was too young to fully appreciate it, but I have been to events organized by our Childhood Eye Cancer Trust in the UK. And one other event that I attended in 2016 was another conference organized by Teenage Cancer Trust here in the UK, which was essentially, it was 2 days of inspirational talks mixing with other survivors. And that's where I met the group of people that you see me with in the photo on the right-hand side here. But now I want to focus on Camp Sunshine because that was the first proper time where I got to mix with people, the first time I got to feel like I actually belonged among other people. So like I said, I attended the first time in June 2011 at their designated retinoblastoma week, which they ran every other time that we've attended up until 2019. And the thing is, the amazing thing about it is that it's often the same people coming back every time. So it's like you meet your own, you could create a family basically with this, and it's one of the most amazing places I think I've ever been. I know there are some people who say they would rather go here than go to Disneyland or Disney World. And evidently, one thing I've put here is that I'd aimed to volunteer in 2020 last year, but obviously, as will probably be a theme for a lot of things this weekend, COVID had other plans. However, I am hoping to be back one day when this is all blown over a bit more. So that's kind of the past. That's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of my journey. And so where am I at now? As I said, I'm a final year pharmacology student, so I've got to find my sort out my final dissertation project. I've got other things to do around that. I'm aiming to go into a master's research program here at Edinburgh, focusing on biomedical research. And as I say, following this, I'm hoping to go on and do a PhD in cancer biology, and fingers crossed that all works out and I can work in a research lab, hopefully something around gene therapy or improving the treatments that are currently available. And I didn't include this slide originally, but after talking with Marissa the other night, I decided to put this in because one thing that I noticed a lot of people are saying is a lot of the questions that have been given were, is living with retinoblastoma life limiting in any way? And I hope that through this talk, I've kind of said, no, it doesn't have to be. I know that if you'd have asked me that even 3-4 years ago, I'd have said it probably would be. But now I think my outlook's changed quite a bit. And I'd say that, you know, it's a rough set of cards to be dealt, but you can do just about anything with it. And one thing, and I put this quote in on the right here, courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is that quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again tomorrow. Because obviously you're gonna have bad days. You're gonna have days where you fall down. You're gonna have days where you need to take a bit more time. And that's okay. It's the fact that you don't give up. It's trying again and keeping on trying and trying and trying. That is what I feel survivorship is. It's that perseverance. It's the drive to keep going. And so I hope that this has been useful in some way. I am going to leave it there. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Kieran. Cheryl, Genevieve, and Kieran have all made me cry, but Kieran, I'm so proud of you. And I don't think you need to cross your fingers that you will get a master's degree and a PhD and change the world, because I know that you will. And we all will be watching and just follow your story, and we'll be so proud. So thank you very much. And now we're going to welcome back Cheryl Newman, who you heard from in our keynote. And I think my favorite part about how I'm going to introduce Cheryl is she is the COO of her home, the Chief Organizing Operator of her home, which I'm going to borrow that title. And she's also the master of drinking tea and coffee at home. So welcome back, Cheryl.
Thank you so much, Marissa. I just feel amazed to be in such incredible company along with Kieran and Genevieve. And I think that this opportunity just is such a demonstration of the fact that we are all very different. And yet, as Genevieve alluded to a couple of times, there is a connection that is hard to put a finger on, but it is very, very real. As I mentioned in my keynote, I didn't have really much exposure to other people with retinoblastoma as I was growing up. I did have opportunities to be involved in the local blindness community. I was fortunate to have contact with a number of other children and indeed adults who were blind and vision impaired. But not people with retinoblastoma. And so when we began to be in contact with other families, and at that stage, it was really in the guise or in the role, I guess, of parents of a newly diagnosed child. But there's just a shorthand that we have. You don't have to explain everything, and you can just share experiences. And so that was something that we really wanted to be involved with and to work towards developing. And for a number of years, we did have an active group of families here in Victoria, Australia. And we were able to meet together in person probably only a couple of times a year, but then we would run into each other on clinic days. And I think a number of parents would relate to what a relief it is when you come into the chaos of a clinic day in a busy children's hospital, and there's someone familiar and someone who's an extra pair of hands if your child or their sibling is unsettled, someone who just gets it when you hear difficult news or can share in the joy that everything is going well. But distance is a real challenge for us here in Australia, and I know we're not the only big country in the world. But we have a relatively small population spread across that country. And there are pockets of it where the population is all gathered together. And then there's vast areas where people are spread out over vast distances. And it was difficult to find ways and means to meet up in person. And remembering that this was in the last century, for goodness sake, technology was not what it is today. So yes, there would be sometimes phone calls or eventually email and that kind of thing, but it wasn't easy. And to be quite honest, as our children moved through treatment and things became more settled and our lives were able to move on in other directions, it was sometimes difficult to summon up the enthusiasm and the energy to make all of that happen. And so over time, that has kind of fallen apart. And to be quite honest, I'm not entirely sure what happens in that space with children these days, but I know that it's something that Sandra is very aware of and very keen to foster connections where possible. And I know that happens in other states as well. But I think that technology really does give us some new opportunities. One of the things that I have found really beneficial is the Facebook groups that exist. Now, think what you will about social media. I think it's a tool and we can try to use it for our benefit as much as possible and try to shut out a lot of the noise and the things that we don't want to be a part of. But it has allowed me on a number of occasions to, if I have a concern or a question, to just post it in the group and say, hey, does anybody have some thoughts about this? Or this is an experience that has just happened to me and I'm feeling upset about it, or it's really amazing, whatever it might be. And there's an almost instant kind of feedback, connection, opportunity to share. So I would just say, if that's something that you're really wanting to foster, to make inquiries, to look around and see what's around, whether it be in social media, whether it be groups that meet together in person in your local area, your state, your province, whatever it is. And if there isn't, and if you're really keen, it's got to begin somewhere. So maybe start reaching out and finding out if there are other people who also have that desire. But what I can say is that we have just had some amazing opportunities because of people we've met through the commonality of retinoblastoma. And that's been in different countries around the world, and even as close as just last year, I was able to meet with another person who lives only about an hour away from me. But previously we had had no knowledge of each other, but were brought together through somebody who knew that we both had retinoblastoma, and have just had some wonderful conversations and been able to be a great encouragement to one another. Look, I feel like I was able to have a lot of time to share my story in the keynote, so I don't want to take a lot of time now, because I think it's really important that we have an opportunity to answer questions and to answer the things that you really want to know about, not just the things that I think might be important to tell you. So I'm actually going to just hand back to Marissa and look forward to the questions that you might have. And speaking for myself, feel free to ask anything. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. I think I can speak for everyone when I say that, wow, the three of you were wonderful and so inspiring, and each brought a really unique story to the table, and just the inspiration. And, you know, as Kieran mentioned, you can live a normal life with retinoblastoma. And yes, there are difficult days and difficult times, but you know what? All three of you guys are doing amazing things. And so thank you for sharing your stories. We are a little bit behind, as I'm not super surprised. So Sandra is actually going to be monitoring the Q&A. So we have time for one question. So Sandra, if we have anyone with their hand raised or any questions, and if not, that's okay. Hi, Tara.
Okay, now
welcome.
I'm unmuted. Now I'm muted. Hi, Marissa.
Hi, Tara. For those of you who don't know, Tara and I were actually college roommates, and over 1 in a million chance that Tara's son had retinoblastoma. So now we are friends for life, as if we already were not friends for life by sharing bunk beds at the University of Southern California. So welcome, Tara.
Yes, I'm very lucky to have Marissa as my advocate and my my guidance counselor through all of this. So my question, I guess, is for people. A lot of people talked about the psychological impacts, and I've got a 6-year-old right now who's got what some people might call quirks, right? He doesn't think he can go to the bathroom outside of a home toilet, or he says he yelled last night 20 times, I can't control it, because he's scared to death of losing a tooth. And so things that obviously I would consider are part of treatments, maybe PTSD or other things. But everybody kind of asked me, well, do you think it's related to the cancer? How do you think? And so I was wondering how people broached those sort of questions, or how you can kind of approach schools or medical professionals with information to kind of say, hey, this is what my kid went through. Or if anybody's found a way to do it, to kind of say, okay, this is where we're starting from. Now, how do we move forward?
I can talk about this a little bit, because I'm in a similar boat with my 6-year-old son, although it's not RB, but he has ADHD. So we definitely deal with quirks. So one thing that I have learned, because he's also had some medical intervention from an early age, he was lucky enough to have a benign tumor develop an osteoid osteoma on his ankle. And he went over a year with us trying to figure out what it was and what was going on. So he was subjected to some interventions and pain and things. So my approach with that really is to be his advocate. It's hard for me to accept a standard that others don't understand. So I will explain my perspective. However, it's not always the accepted standard, and I might be seeking something that doesn't exist. So I've had to educate a lot of people on children's mental health at the school board. There are policies within the Ontario ministry that are outdated still from the 80s. And I didn't see myself as being a school advocate, but it's just kind of happened. Because I've had to be that person. And unfortunately, they're young, so we're told, oh, it's just an average behavior for a 6-year-old. Allow him to develop, allow him things to settle, and we'll figure it out over time. But I haven't allowed for that status quo either. I'm not going to accept the let it be, we'll figure it out in time. More symptoms will develop, we'll see. Kids don't have mental health issues. I'm like, no. So I would say just keep on fighting with what you know is your truth, and you'll find the people within the pack that are the yous and the me's and the people that get it, and you'll hold on to them close. And you gather your village of people who understand. And unfortunately, it's not an easy road of being that parent advocate. But as long as you can continue to know at the end of the day, you're doing what's best for your child and for your family, that's where you can hold peace and know that you will come across various hurdles in his life, your life, all these things. And you'll meet them together. You'll come across different people, different situations. This isn't the first or the last time that you guys will navigate something difficult together. I hope that helps a little bit.
That was great. Thank you.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Genevieve. Kieran, go for it.
I would definitely second what Genevieve said. Don't take no for an answer. Only right? A medical practitioner doesn't know your child like you know them. They don't spend 24 hours a day with them. And actually, my mom summed this up perfectly with a post she shared the other day, where she said, stand up for your child, even if it means standing up against the world. And that, I think, is the message we're all trying to get across, is don't take no for an answer. If you need to do your own research and just slam papers on the doctor's desk, so be it. But, you know, don't take no for an answer, and definitely do make sure that you get your kid the care that they need, because if it is a mental health condition, the sooner you identify it, the sooner it's found, the easier it is to get them the right mental health that they can the right treatment that they can get to improve their mental health and quality of life. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, and if I may just add, I think I would sum it up in trust your gut. You know your child, and I think whether it has been caused as a result of the treatments and things that they've experienced. Yes, I think it's clear people who have shared today and others that we've been in contact with that often there are lingering impacts from that. But in some senses, what we're dealing with children is very much the immediate. So yes, the cause is important, but even more so is the practical ways that it's impacting their lives today. So being the one who is able to help them voice what's going on and what they need, and being the one who can stand up and say, yes, that may be different to the majority of other children, but this is what my child needs to be successful and develop confidence in the environment that you're working with them. And please, can we work on this together? And I think what Morgan was talking about this morning in helping our children to learn to cope is so important, but so is working as a team and winning over the other people in their lives to be a part of that team is so important as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was a wonderful question, and thank you to all three of you. And I know Tara, and I know she will not take no for an answer. So I think that was great advice. All right. Well, thank you so much to Cheryl, to Kieran, and to Genevieve for being on this panel. Again, you guys were wonderful and just an absolutely perfect way to start off our first panel.